So the title of our next presentation is Connecting Web3 to Web2 to Create Opportunities Through Real-World Cases and Adoption. I would like to welcome Balázs Némethi, founder at kycDAO.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Is it on? Yes. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining. Okay. So in Web3, we have done a lot of things. In the past couple of years, over a decade now, we achieved a lot. And I still want to remind everyone, because of a recent hack that happened, that plain text are not for storing private keys. Because everything in crypto is built around private key management. If that doesn't work, we can't prove anything. We can't sign messages, or others can use it to sign other messages that shouldn't be signed. So everything when we talk about Web3 is centered around the concept of private keys managed by wallets, interacting with services, blockchains, smart contracts, and everything that we are building for quite some time. And to be able to actually get adoption, we need to make it much more simpler to get things done with these private keys and keep them safe. So what we have done, we had a DAO hack. We made Ethereum to fork. We built primitives, such as the DeFi primitives, that everyone now realizes their ultimate power of how to run decentralized services and create decentralized finance. But of course, they have still uphill battle in the real-world economy, as Sybilotic resistance is maybe one thing, but also certain industries are still regulated. And so they have hard time to access these tooling that might have gone through some questionable times. And then there are the NFTs. We all love NFTs. Some of us might not, but many of us ended up having at least one or two. POAPs are NFTs at the end. So NFTs brought in to the crypto space an immense amount of new talent and new people who approach this question from a very different perspective. Just like with ICOs, NFTs also brought in a giant crowd of people who are only here to make money and use other people's money to make them rich. And we're also building communities. Some of them are gathered in DAOs, some of them are just operating on a Discord server or a Telegram server. Some of them are making votes, and many of them are facing the question of are we actually voting equally? Is voting fair? Do we know who is voting? Do we want to know? But how can we ensure that our voting mechanisms are correct? And I'm happy to say it, but token-weighted voting is not pure democracy. We can argue about that later. And you might assume what's on the other side of all this thing. We got recognized. And recognition comes with certain disadvantages. And these are that scammers have been scrolling all across the ecosystem, making money wherever it's possible. And I'm not talking about MEV bot developers, I'm talking about ICOs and NFT drops that are literally designed to scam money out of people. And scams brought in regulations, or they got the attention of the regulators, because at the end of the day, they are still people, and their role is to actually ensure that people doesn't get harmed. And as Web3 systems are not really linked to one certain countries, the best they can do, or what they are trying to do, is to protect their own citizens. But in Web3, there are no citizens. So they are struggling to figure out how exactly to do certain things, and definitely they go overboard in some cases. But we can agree that they actually started to understand the technology, and we can no longer say that regulators are behind. And what they use, what we've seen a couple of weeks ago, they start to apply sanctions. Whether they are fair or not, that's another debate, but they do apply them. And sanctions are extremely broad-reaching mechanisms, primarily designed to sanction countries that have been issues in a geopolitical scale, but in the last 20 years, as doing war has been going down, arguable, but sanctions has been extended from countries to companies to even individuals to limit access in the world economy, simply put. And as we have seen, they have been used, and there is a very good chance that this wasn't the last time with Tornado Cash then we saw certain services being sanctioned, partially or fully. And why I'm talking about this is because this is what comes when we start blurring Web2 and Web3. This is what comes when we want to onboard 1 billion people. 1 billion people is not going to have an understanding what a smart contract. 1 billion people is not going to have an understanding of how to manage a private key. Most people have one password that they use across the entire internet. Whether we like it or not, we can't say education will change it, but we have been educating many people about how to use the internet, and this hasn't changed. So expecting that just because we want it will happen is very hard. And it is a long journey, but the connection between Web2 and Web3 has been made. Financial institutions are deploying large amount of capitals. Financial institutions are regulated. They have no other means. They can fight regulations. They have been fighting it much more, with much more budgets than the Web3 ever did. But they are regulated, and their entire business is regulated and not just a subsection of it. So they need to meet certain requirements. As well as we are talking digital money. And even though in some cases these assets are an NFT that's used as a PFP on Twitter, but in other cases it might represent a security that's being traded on the blockchain. But everyone understands that it's a security representing a mortgage market using a blockchain instead of a centralized ledger as a technology. And what we are trying to do at kycDAO is to enable the ability to bring compliance to Web3. Now, I know it has a lot of depth. I'm very happy to go into it. But overall, a big portion of the problem that we have been having is that everything decentralized, everything permissionless is good as long as you only want to interact with services that can meet those requirements. But once you are inviting everyone to join the game, you're actually inviting their requirements that already extend to them. And these are very much compliance and regulatory requirements we are talking about, as in general, these are financial tools. So what kycDAO is set out to do is to enable Web3 services, smart contracts, projects, DAOs, and so on, to be able to become compliant without really needing to know that much about their users, technically speaking, nothing, through a mechanism that sounds relatively simple, but it's pretty much designed around legal questions. And so the end result is a very simple, straightforward process where a wallet owner can come to one of our SDKs, connect with the wallet, trigger the process of verification. We are talking about a compliant bank-level verification with government ID and selfie. And then once the verification is done, and once the user is not on a sanction list, both Web2 and Web3 versions of a sanction list, they are offered to mint a proof of their verification in the form of a KYC NFT. This KYC NFT can technically be minted on any chains. It only represents the proof. It doesn't have any personal identifiable information, so no privacy is being lost, because either way, it just proves that the issuer of the verification trusts the user. And I'm saying issuer because kycDAO is not a one-issuer framework. Yes, we have our own issuer company that takes care of all the liability and regulatory engagement that's wherever it's needed. But kycDAO is inviting other companies that can meet the requirements to issue fully compliant verifications to actually create a framework where we can have the ability for Web3 projects to stay compliant without needing to know their users. And really, this is the goal. We have been building, we are live on a couple of chains. We are going to a lot of other chains. The goal is to enable wallets to be able to prove their verifications and be able to cross between chains by connecting wallets, by enabling the ability that we are bringing in a legal framework that enables a lot of new opportunities that hasn't been there before. And through these legal mechanisms, we can enable a whole new breed of Web3 projects that can actually directly interact with the Web2 financial ecosystem, because now they can meet compliance requirements built using DeFi primitives or decentralized primitives. It doesn't have to be DeFi. And kind of like, what does it mean? It means that you can create a smart contract that gates against this KYC NFT, and a wallet holder that already has the KYC NFT can just access the smart contract seamlessly. But if they don't, then the front end of the service can offer them the ability to verify their wallet or verify one of their wallets, because hopefully most of us have multiple wallets for slightly different purposes. You will be able to set up a verified wallet where you are accessing services that require verification. It doesn't mean that all your wallets get verified. It means that you have the ability in the Web3 space to represent that now you're acting as a verified person who is not on a sanction list, who can access certain gated services. And really, this is the concept that we have been pushing, because once there is an ecosystem and there are a number of issuers, I do not agree with one of the panelists earlier said that KYC can be decentralized. KYC literally can't be decentralized. The reason is because KYC is a legal problem. It's not a technical problem. And the KYC is only compliant to meet regulatory requirements if it actually, there is a company that takes liability and have data retention. That doesn't really decentralize well, because liability is literally a company or an individual, but let's hope it's a company. And so it has to be registered. Now you can have a lot of companies being registered, but it's still going to be centralized around those companies. But what you can do is to bring in a large number of trusted companies that are able to meet these requirements and do the verifications that way. And so kind of like this is exactly what we are building on the issuer side. And I'm getting to the end of my presentation. We are live. We are going live on other chains. If you are interested to learn more, you can ask questions now or find me in the lobby or around here. You can learn more at kycDAO.xyz. We have been a bit busy building, so our documentation is going to come public in about a month. But if you have any questions, we can give you all the information and all the SDKs that you might want. Are there any questions?
Oh, looks like we're good. You left them speechless. Great job.
There is a question.
One.
Thanks, Balázs. So how tested is this model in the wild? I mean, I agree with you about KYC needing somebody to take custody of the data, but do you think the regulators are going to see the nuance, or are they just going to say, oh, it's DeFi, I don't care if you're following the rules, I don't like it, strike?
I don't understand the question. Can you?
So we're seeing fairly heavy-handed regulation right now. Tornado is actually one of the least heavy-handed in some ways. The EU wants everybody with a non-custodial wallet to go through KYC. So I feel if they're making those sort of statements, then they're not going to be able to accept regulatory, well, I fear they might not accept regulatory compliant DeFi in any guise.
I'm not really a regulator. Technically speaking, if you build a DeFi protocol that only interacts with verified self-custody wallets, then that will meet their requirements. That would be my answer to this question. But I also hope that the Trevor rule doesn't cross passes as it stands today.
Cool.
The regulation he's referring to is called, internationally it's a Trevor rule. In Europe it's the, what's the TFR? TFR. There is a question.
Hey, do you think companies like Uniswap will soon also be forced to integrate any kind of KYC solution to their trading?
Ask the SEC. It's literally, currently I think it's in their hands. The forcing part is definitely the SEC. Whether it's happening or not, I think like, hopefully not. Like, that's what I can say, but it will be public when it will be public, if there is any decision ever. Any other questions? If there are no more questions, then thank you for... Oh, there is a question.
Here, I got it. Oh.
Sorry.
Thanks, Balázs. Quick question on liability issues. Where does the liability stay when, I mean, with kycDAO, DAO's in the name, so just curious.
Yeah, so basically the DAO brings together for-profit entities that are like meet financial regulatory requirements, have data retention mechanisms, and in case of like a subcoin are able to meet regulatory requirements to pass on data to regulators. We run a company that does certain amount of the verifications that we are carrying out, but there will be other issuers who can meet the same exact requirements. And these companies have the liability. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Good presentation, Balázs. Appreciate it.